leadership is, to quote the management literature, a contested category. To quote Jacqueline Novogratz, who's a much better writer than the management literature, it is a sacred trust. Our panel this evening understands how important that trust is. And our moderator has provoked and entertained us at the Skoll World Forum before. Ray Suarez is the doyen of public service broadcasters. And public service, like social entrepreneurship, is what it's all about. Ray will lead our last panel discussion with his inimitable brand of inspired followership. Ray Suarez.
Let me bring out our panelists. Lydia Wilbard from Camfed, the Campaign for Female Education. Vera Cordeiro, founder of Saúde, Criança, Brazil Child Health. Gro Brundtland, former head of the WHO, former Prime Minister of Norway. And Mary Robinson, former President of Ireland and former United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. What a panel. The Power to Lead is one of those session titles that sounds like it was computer generated. If there was something called a conference organizer app, you might just have it spit out names of panel discussions and come up with the Power to Lead. But, you knew there was a but coming. If you pull it apart, I think the real strength comes from its main component pieces, power and lead. And take a look at this panel, which in ways large and small has pushed back against the constraints of old thinking, pushed back against the predictable, pushed back to unlock the power of those they lead. Power and leading are probably used very differently, let's say, by Kim Jong-un's cabinet from the way our panelists would use those two terms. So let's begin. Does the power to lead first have to run up against the power of no? No is one of the most powerful forces going in the world because everything that's going wrong in today's world has somebody who's willing to defend it. Perhaps not overtly, but defend the status quo, defend the way we've always done things, defend the way things are, say it's too soon, don't move too fast, it's too expensive, it's too, so no. The power to lead means beating the power of no, doesn't it, Lydia?
Yes.
Tell us how.
Yes. No. No, it's too risky to take a girl to school. You know, no, it's not safe there. No, we do not have enough for the family. We can't afford this for the girl. So I work with an organization which pushes an agenda, which looks for an opportunity for the girls to be in class. And you must know, all of you, that it's not easy. It hasn't been easy over the years. And these girls that we work with, they have faced a lot of no's in their lives. Almost everyone has told them, no, it is not possible for you. So my role and my job in Camfed, Tanzania, it's breaking the no's. It's, if you call the term disruptive, I don't know if I get it right. I wish I can have a Swahili word. But it's disrupting the no's and the valleys and mountains that these girls and young women in rural communities of Africa face. the no's that they hear from everybody, that you cannot do it, you are not going to afford, you are not going to be able to sustain, you are going to be too late, it is too late for you to be able to be in class. So I think this is the no's that we are talking about. So my power to lead
if I understand you, it's not district commissioners of education, it's not ministers in Dar es Salaam, it's the people themselves who've already internalized being turned down, being turned back so many times that you have to use your power to make them believe in themselves again.
Exactly. It's the circumstances that has put the no's in front of them. So I have to use the power to create that, to break that, for them to see the way and the room, to provide the resources for them to be able to break that, the no's.
Vera, Brazil, one of the fastest growing economic powers in the world, about to take the world stage again with 2 big parties, with the World Cup and the Olympics, yet at the same time, one of the most unequal societies on the planet. And there are probably a lot of people who figure that one day the problems you see every day will just sort of get taken care of. But you want to take care of them now.
Yes. You know, as a doctor working during 20 years in a public hospital, I realized that the work we did there had its limits. And I have to go beyond the hospital walls to create a new paradigm of health. You know, just to give you 2 examples. One day I was in the pediatric department in Rio de Janeiro, and my job was to tell to Pedrina's son, a 3-year-old boy, that he has to amputate his hand to continue to be alive. And I had also to explain to his mother that he has to cut his hand. And she said to me, to my surprise, she said to me, Vera, I understood, but do you have a job for me? Because after that amputation, I will go to the street to beg for money. Do you have a job? See, with no answer, I stopped it. Then I tried to rethink about our work inside the hospitals. Then in the same week, a mother that has a child, 2 years old also, you know, she said to me, my daughter, she has a problem, she cannot digest her food. So, and the milk is very expensive. I'm not able to raise her. Can you take her at your home and you raise her? She was giving her daughter. And I said, my goodness, one has no job. The other one cannot afford to raise the daughter. What's the role of the physician, nurses, you know, not only us, but the health system, not only in Brazil, but all over the world. So I start, you know, thinking that I have to create something new, not to replace the government, but to make sense what the government does inside. But I have no idea. We started in a stable where the horses used to be, from scratch. I have no power like both of them. So no money at all in a stable. And started, but I knew I wanted to change the world. And I knew I was a doctor that wanted to fight poverty. And from a very humble place, then this vicious cycle, poverty, hospitalization, rehospitalization, that we want to break, we did that through that organization.
I'm guessing there was no lesson in medical school about what to do with someone who realizes they can't earn a living once you save their life by taking their hand off. You had to be inventive beyond the limits of your education. How'd you do that?
I mean, my formal education in my house?
Well, in medical school, there's probably no lesson on what to do when a mother gives you a child.
Yes. I think is that the most disruptive time of my life, because To start, I remember myself and a group of volunteers in the middle of the stable where the horses used to be, and think to myself, who am I? You know, I used to be a traditional physician. Now I'm ruffling things to my house to do what I have no idea what it will become. And that transformation from a doctor to a social entrepreneur, and I have to thank Ashoka, because we have no money, and Ashoka said, you are not crazy. Of course I am crazy, but you are not crazy. You are a social entrepreneur. So I think this madness has a name. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And after when the Skoll Foundation appeared in my life, Avina and Schwab, and all those marvelous institutions, say, whoa, this madness can be scalable, you know, we can scale. So that's a wonderful time.
They're reassured that this madness does have a name, so that's good. You've had a very different experience from our other panelists, but I'm sure no fewer number of times where people have said, oh, we can't do that. Can you think of a time where you have had to say, well, we're going to do it?
Yeah. Well, I can think of many times. You know, Kofi Annan was mentioning when we had this terrible pandemic, SARS, spreading. As we started scared about what in fact was happening out far east with my staff in that weekend, and I said, well, we have to be able to stop this because already it had spread from one country to a couple of others. And people were dying, at least 10%, maybe 15% of those who got them. So I said, you know, we have to be able to find a way to stop the spreading of this disease because it will cross across the world. It had already come to Canada. So my staff said, yes, but it's very hard, you know. It's not possible, like you say. We can send warnings about this disease spreading. And I said, but those warnings have to be so strong that people don't enter planes from the places where this disease is already there, so that we risk spreading it across the world. They said we couldn't, it had never been done, that WHO sent travel recommendations, which we then, and I know I was lucky because I had been prime minister. And I knew that there was no other institution in the world that could do something which was new and different, in something where we early could be able to stop something that could be really dramatic. And I think because I had been prime minister, I dared to say to my staff, no one else can do it. We are the only institution that has the authority in principle that we can say this is what the world has to do. So, you know, and they were impressed. Is it possible? They were scared. But we did it.
I would have loved to have been on the other extension when the Chinese got that call. Not an easy call to make.
No,
you knew it was the right call,
yeah.
But you knew that there were a lot of people who were going to say, she can't do that. There was a lot of opposition.
Yeah. But in 4.5 months, that whole global danger was over. The last case was contained, and the thing was gone from the surface of the earth.
Mary Robinson, as High Commissioner for Human Rights, you probably ran into people who said you can't do that enough times to fill a book, which indeed you have. Yet, like Prime Minister Brundtland, you have to believe that you've got enough people behind you that your yes means something to their no, don't you?
Yeah. But before I answer, and I will, of course, you know, the power to lead, it's for women in the 21st century. That's good. You know, that's already. I learned a lesson very early in life when I got a big no from my own society that helped me a lot when I was High Commissioner, and I'll just tread it through very quickly. I was elected to the Senate in Ireland at the age of 25, and I really had an agenda to open up and liberalise Ireland, starting with legalising family planning. And this was late 1970, early 1971. Mm-hmm. And I got 2 male senators to join with me, and we tabled a bill in the Parliament to amend the criminal law, where it wasn't against the law to use a condom, but it was against the criminal law to either buy or sell a condom. And married women could only avail of the contraceptive pill if they had a prescription from their doctor that they had a cycle regulation problem. Mm-hmm. And it must have been the Irish weather, but there were an awful lot of married women with cycle regulation problems. And so for me, you know, a law graduate, etc., this was a simple thing to do. I completely underestimated the response from Irish society at the time. I was denounced from pulpits, I got hate letters, and I wobbled, actually. I mean, I was really scary, because I was used to being admired and being bright and, you know, achieving, etc. And suddenly, even walking down the main street in Dublin, Grafton Street, I thought people were going to jump out and say, "You are the devil incarnate, I hate you," because this is what the letters were saying. And I learned that it's not so easy to change deep traditional aspects. And so when I served as High Commissioner for Human Rights, I would get ministers saying, "Your rights are Western rights, they're not our rights. We have different," and it was very, very important. We have our own culture. And it was very important to distinguish between culture, which is extremely important, and in fact human rights should be embedded in the culture of countries and strengthened by that. But then there are things called culture, which are not necessarily and shouldn't be called culture. And they are traditional practices that are harmful. One of them, which the elders, which Gro and I are, we're the younger elders, but we're, you know, early child marriage is often thought of as being cultural in some communities. It's our culture. The average age of marriage is 12 here in the Bihar province of India, where we were, or the Bihar state, or in the Amhara region in Ethiopia. But actually, it's not something that we can kind of say it's cultural and we can't do anything about it. On the contrary, it's a traditional practice which happens to be harmful. Mm-hmm. Slavery was a harmful practice, and apartheid was a harmful practice. But the way to change it is something that I learned. You have to change it from within and over time, and work at it, and work at gentle cutting, as some very good people here do, and work at the end. But at the same time, you have to be very clear. And that was a very early lesson, that it took about 10 years for the law to change in Ireland, and for people to accept and even to discuss sexual relations, use of condoms, etc. It was really tough. So I was very glad that I had that early no, that I had a kind of shock no, because it was so severe. And afterwards to realize that change of that kind has to happen from within, the whole village, the whole community, as we're learning in Girls Not Brides, the elders, the global partnership which we've helped to bring together. And you know, it's the courageous leaders in a village, and sometimes it's the imams, sometimes it's the mothers, sometimes it's the girls themselves. Gro and I were in a school in Bihar in India, and the girls were actually negotiating with their parents to stay an extra year in school. You know, imagine negotiating when they would go around to a girl's house if she heard a rumor or there were whispers, and she would call her friends around to say, "Look, she's only 13. Could she stay until she's 14 or even 15? And you know, that takes a lot of courage to change the norms that are traditional practices that are harmful. But it seems as if you're changing something very, very fundamental.
But I'm glad you told that story, because part of the power to lead comes from not just speaking for yourself, doesn't it? I mean, you're the sharp end of the spear, but you've got a lot of people behind you who want this thing to happen, and you're the face of that morning, in that meeting, in that conference. Mm-hmm. But you're not just there batting for yourself. You're leading, but you got to have people behind you. How do you get them? You started, a great many good things have started in stables, but there you were, and you started by yourself, but eventually Saúde, Criança is moving all over the country. It's a spreading movement. Camfed and Kama, its alumni group, spreading throughout East Africa. There has to be a story between I'm standing here by myself and I'm standing here for millions. How do you make that journey? How do you make that work as a leader?
Let me tell you 2 stories that, I think is a two-way road. We work with a lot of volunteers. And normally they used to say, today is not my day to be here, but can I stay here today? This is the only place that my life makes sense. Because I believe we all have happiness if you understand that we are all linked. So the volunteers, we joke that we economize in Prozac because, they understood very quickly the need to be there. They are not there because they are good persons. Of course they are good persons, because they earn. And what they earn, they don't earn money. They earn values. They transform. Listen to the heroic mothers that they work with HIV and many children ran inside the house, with a full catastrophe. So the volunteers stop complaining about her life, and they change their life, and they are more powerful to be happy. That's a kind of talk about happiness, And I have 2 stories very quickly to tell you, because from the mothers we have a lot of energy. One day, Saúde Criança was receiving an award in Rio, and we recognized among the 7 awardees one of our mother there that passed through the program. And that kind of things, the award she received means a lot for us, more than the award that we were receiving that night. Because what she did, after the program, she was able to found a favela inn, is a hostel for foreign people, and she was able to manage. And she was receiving the same award that we were receiving. So it's, my goodness, that's the real award. So that's...
Yeah, so for me, I think people live by examples. They live from what they see. So for me to draw people to support me, to push the agenda for breaking the barriers that the girls face, it's the culture that I create with the examples, the culture of listening, the culture of sharing with the stories, the culture that I also acquire from the people that I see leading. So I have this story. I happened to win a scholarship to study in the United States at Johns Hopkins. And here I am a girl from, rural Africa in Dar es Salaam, where English is not actually the first language. And I find myself in the middle of the United States at one of the big universities and full of technology, things that I wasn't aware of. But this openness that I got from the academic advisor direct from the first place, the culture that she created for me to be able to knock even without appointment, I think that's what I learned from leaders, and that's what I try to create within the organization. So I have this responsibility of making sure that I act as an example, that people that look at me, that I share the stories, they are able to acquire what I aspire. So the culture of listening, the culture of sharing stories of the girls, to me, it has worked very well. I attend 11 government bodies at the national level, where I have a room to share stories, to create an understanding of what it would take for a girl to be able to stay in school and finish school. So people live by examples, and like you can achieve a lot you can gain support from people when you create that environment where people can actually learn from what you are doing.
Sending girls to school, making sure poor people don't die from curable disease, having children not die for want of $2 worth of medicine, stopping people killing each other. Nobody gets up in any responsible public forum and argues against any of these things. Nobody says, oh, I'm for uneducated girls. I'm for dead children. Yet, this is still a struggle. Why is it still a struggle?
Because of inequity. I mean, when you look at the world, the gaps are so large. And in most countries, people live together in a society, but they live at very different levels of standard of life. You know, and it's not only the very poor compared to the super rich, but there are layers of big unfairness and injustice. So unless you make policies inside countries and between countries, as Kofi Annan was asking for at the global level, there is no way to give that necessary investment and right to each person. For health and education, for instance, if you don't have a society that's willing to share, and where you have, you know, the courage to tax people, to have them show the necessary willingness to share. So I get very frustrated sometimes when I hear people complaining about a country that is so much poorer than another country, but inside that country there are a few people who work hard to make the changes that we did in our countries when we were poor and before we saw to it that there is the right to school, there is the right to health for everyone. And you have to redistribute income, power, opportunities to make a decent society.
That's disruption, all right. I mean, if we're talking about, as we have all week, disruption. Disruption is the wrecking ball that you have to swing against inertia, because it's inertia that keeps millions of girls illiterate. It's inertia that keeps poor people sick in places they don't have to be sick, in societies that are rich enough for them not to be sick. It's inertia that let you, President Robinson, not even see certain populations in countries you were there to visit. Yet, we still have a habit of using disruption as a bad word to describe a bad set of circumstances. How do you, can we rehabilitate disruption and embrace it instead of fearing it?
There's another disruption that I'm increasingly passionate about now, and that is the link between human rights, climate change, and the sort of injustice of the way that climate is undermining very poor livelihoods. And yet we have a lot of people denying that there's a problem or not wanting to look at this as being a problem about people. There's a really big barrier to, for example, in the United States, getting a debate about this that we urgently need. And part of it is the corruption of money. It's, you know, the amount of money that's going into bad science. It's a little bit, to me, like the tobacco issue. I think that, in a way, fossil fuel is almost like the tobacco of the 21st century, because it's going to cause these emissions, it is causing them, that are causing climate shocks in countries in Africa, in small island states, and you know, and the extent of that problem. We need a huge disruption. We need a climate awakening that will shake us out of our complacency or out of our inertia, or whatever it is. And you know, it's of such huge importance.
Have you been disruptive? And tell me how. Tell me, because I keep hearing it. It's dropped like sweet and low around here this week, if any of you are still using it. Disruption is this sort of valorized word, and when I disrupt meetings and disrupt staffs at work and stuff like that, people get mad at me. But I'm learning that I'm supposed to think it's a swell thing. What is it about it that works, and how does it work?
when you talk about why, children are dying all over the world, why women are not able to go to school, I think we have to think about the culture. We live in such a materialistic culture, all over the world. And it's very hard to go out of the status quo. And I think one of the disruptions I did in my life, I still remember in the very beginning, I started to ruffle things of my house, My husband used to travel all over the world with the IBM, he worked for IBM. And I remember I couldn't see my two girls, 10 and 13 years old at that time, having everything, And then the other day in the hospital, a mother giving a child for me. So I started ruffling things of my house. And I still remember my daughter saying, no, my Japanese dolls, no, mother, please. And they locked their, because they know I was totally mad. But I have no money, even my friends, when I called them, they knew that I didn't want to go to the cinema. I needed their money, their energy. So they didn't call me back again. So I think we have to have courage to go out of the status quo. As Yunus says yesterday, that he believes in a world without poverty, that poverty will be in a museum. In a museum. I truly believe in that, but I think we have to change inside, because people, they feel afraid of moving from the status quo. But as Dalai Lama said one day, if he was very selfish, he will be a very, lovely person. He will take care of others, because they wait to be happy. So when you are able to go out of the status quo, there's no end. It's a path with no end. You go on, you go, like all the audience here.
I think for me, it's going beyond what we see and asking the why. So, like you said, I get so frustrated when people will be there blaming, girls not attending. Sometimes they come to us to say, oh, some of the girls that you are supporting in school fees, they are really not, they are not attending school. I think we should change the method of selecting them. Maybe they don't want a school. I get so frustrated. You have to go beyond why she's not attending in spite of, being able to get the support. There is something behind that. Maybe she's going through other difficulties that we are not able to interrupt. Maybe she does not even have the motivation because she has received a lot of no's in between. So for me, it's more of understanding beyond what we see to be able to interrupt something that we want to push. So I wanted to tell a story of a girl. And some of the girls that we are working with, they are really coming from the vulnerable environment. And sometimes I consider disruptive to be either positive or negative. So I would say the girls that we are working with, they actually have faced a lot of disruptions in a negative way. And so here is a girl who lost a mother when she was 10 years old. She had a very hard-working father, but unfortunately, he wasn't able to provide enough for her to be in school. She happened to be fortunate to attend secondary school, and she worked very hard. She passed, so she were to go to high school. And because she understood that the father is not going to be able to provide, because as you go up, the cost of education becomes higher. So she opted to go to a fishing camp, where she's going to work for an auntie who has business of fishing. After some time helping, worked very hard with a hope that an auntie is going to provide for education by the time she's going to school. So here the time comes, she's not able, the aunt comes with an excuse, accusing that this girl has stolen the money. So the money is missing in the house. And she has been accused of, being responsible for this. So imagine in a moment that with all the hope that she had, it was relying on this auntie, and now it turns out that she's being accused of the money. What would you think this girl would do? Stop there? What?
No.
And that girl is me.
Oh, yeah.
So it's this courage and life experiences that sometimes they inform our programs, our way of working. Because it takes an understanding of what circumstances that some of these girls that we support, they will go through. So someone will come and blame, she's not attending, she didn't do this, but the circumstances that these girls and young women that face in the journey of education, it's huge and mountains. So as a director of Camfed Tanzania, and as a vision that Camfed International and the other African countries have, is to be able to go beyond what we see, ask why, and be accountable, accountable to the girls. Of course, accountable to the donor, the people that gives us money, but first accountable, accountable to the girls themselves that we intend to walk through within this journey.
I want to close by asking about when, whether it's ever over. When I look at the work the four of you are doing in your various ways, it doesn't seem like there's ever a point at which you're done. You have to keep pushing. You have to keep pressing. You have to keep pushing through people who stand in your way. You have to call out, make accountable those people who work hard to do the minimum compliance, the absolute bare minimum, so that you won't shame them or name them in public or tell the world who they are. On one level, it could be a little discouraging to never be finished, or tremendously empowering and enlivening. I have my guess about the four of you, but how do you keep gas in the tank? Sorry, Mrs. Robinson. How do you keep gas in the tank, and how do you keep pushing forward in a world where you know a lot of the people that you are coming up against want to do the absolute bare minimum they can get away with?
Well, I think what you're hearing probably from the four of us is a passion about what we do. And for me, it's been a kind of progression of human rights, basically. I mean, I learned when I was High Commissioner for Human Rights that basically the Western focus of human rights is very much on civil and political rights, and underestimates the importance of rights to food and safe water, health, education in so many parts of the world where you don't have that. And you know, if you look at the world, I mean, Gro rightly mentioned inequality, inequity. We have such an unequal world. So now I link the human rights development and the threat of climate change and the disruption in the wrong sense of climate shocks that are affecting. So, you know, you wake up energized by the injustice of what's happening and the need to make the world a fairer place, to make a contribution to that. And I think that that's probably what's a common chord between the four of us, a passion for justice, for equality, for being able to make some difference in people's lives and being able to bring out the potential of people. I heard the word listening a lot, which I think is also very important.
So in the, you know, from Mary told about her law proposal about the right to family planning in Ireland. And as I was a young politician, I saw there were 10, 15% women in the Norwegian parliament. And I said, that's wrong. This has to change. And within 15, 20 years of my time, we had 50% women in the parliament and in the government. Now, I'm saying it because of the contrast between what you see close to yourself in your own society and what you can do there, to what Mary and I and others are now doing with, for instance, Girls Not Brides. When you see what keeps girls and women back in many parts of the world, it is not the type of thing that we had to deal with in my country. It is far more basic. And it goes to the roots of how people still live and what kinds of bad practices and traditions that are keeping people under, pressure for generations. Because these young girls who are 12, who are forced to marry, who bear children early, the children they have and the girls they give birth to are easily into the same new generational poverty, roof above them. They cannot grow like the girls that you educate and help educate. So it shows the world has so many facets, and that's why it's never over. You go to Bihar or you go to Ethiopia and see these young people, and if it's going to take years and years to change the basis of their lives, it's now they need the help for that change. It's now these communities need to be helped to overcome things which have lived there and people haven't thought about. As you say, it's always been like this. It should be like this in the next generation. No, not in the next generation.
Vera, you've said that you believe that women can thrive even in the worst circumstances. Why do you still believe that with everything that you've seen?
Yes, because I saw the transformation, every day in the organization. For example, a woman came, and when you saw her, as we have a holistic model to promote social inclusion through health, we work in many areas. The first time when you saw the mother, you think, oh, she's hopeless. It's impossible to deal with so many kind of problems. But this holistic approach that we do, not to replace the government, link it to the government, makes a huge difference in their lives. And after 8 months, you see another woman in front of you. And you are also another woman, And that's so, you feel blessed to work. And when I wake up, sometimes I wake up very overwhelmed, I know, tired, but most of the time I feel that is an honor to do what I do. And I think what can I say? What's the name in English? The secret. I think the secret is to celebrate, even small step in the institution and with the mothers, with the volunteers, all the leaders, the staff, great staff that we have, to celebrate not only the huge accomplishment like the Skoll Award, but the small ones. So when you see it back, you look to your past and all the leaders of the institution, is a path that you cannot leave.
Well, Vera was looking back over her shoulder. I want you to look down the road. When I go to Tanzania in 5 years, in 10 years, what will I be able to see because more girls go to school?
Independence of the family, power, smiles in the families. The smile of the mother is the smile of the family. Am I not true? So if a mother is happy at home, isn't it everybody is happy? Yes. So it's a smile of a family. It's the policies that are made with the contribution and the information of every gender. It's economic independence, because I think we have seen, you have seen me, right? Will my children need support from Camfed? No. No, I can take my child to school, right? Yes, so by the way, I wasn't supported by Camfed. Camfed was not there by the time I was struggling with the school. But what we do in Camfed is supporting the girls that in 5 years to come, in 10 years to come, they are going to be able to support their families and contribute in the development of the nation itself. And they are going to create an environment where everybody is happy, everybody is confident, and, you know, is not regretting of being born.
Girl power.
Yeah.
Well, speaking for that minority of the human race known as men, I'm glad I was able to be a member of this panel today. Thank you for having me. Thank you all for your attention.